Weed is a crutch for creative people. If you're like me, you are creative and deep thinking, and you look for the significance behind things. You are not satisfied with the superficial explanations that most people accept as a given. And you are also dissatisfied with spending your time passively consuming content or just coasting through life beyond your job and your relationships. You need some type of outlet to be able to express your creativity and your thoughts, whether that's art or writing or song or poetry or music, whatever it may be. And weed has a special way of being able to artificially fulfill that creative impulse and that desire for profound insight that deep thinkers and creative people have. Because it artificially inflates the felt significance of whatever mental content you are experiencing in your mind. It makes our ordinary thoughts feel far more profound than they actually are. It makes every idea seem like a revelation. And so what that does is, say for example, you're watching a TV show that is fairly mundane, like Trailer Park Boys, or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or Friends, or whatever it is. What you'll end up doing if you are smoking weed and you're high enough to access this state, and if you're anything like me, it's fairly easy to do that because I'm a particularly sensitive individual, and so it doesn't take a lot of weed to do that, is that I will start to project meaning into places where it's not actually present. And it will make it seem like the actions of the characters on the screen and the narrative arc that is occurring has this fundamentally universal human significance with deep archetypal symbology, and there's a whole hero's journey going on, and there's multiple layers of interpretation and meaning. And yet, when I try to actually articulate this out loud, it's very difficult, because what weed does is it gives you this false sense of epiphany. It gives you this false sense of insight. It is a pseudo-wisdom experience. And that's simply because it's taking mundane thoughts, it's taking perception itself and dialing it up to, 110%. It is not actually giving you deep insights, but it is giving you that felt experience of having reached an insight. It is a very pleasurable experience. It's very satisfying. And in the moment, every new thought that comes up feels like the next big thing. That's why, a lot of my journaling when I am high, I look back at it and read it, and there's this overwhelming urgency in the writing that this right here is the epiphany. This right here is the next big idea that's going to change my life. And there's also a sense of, urgency behind it. I may have already just used that word, but being redundant as it is, the urgency that comes is a result of that amplification of profundity, that enhancement of perception. And it is nothing more than a mirage, because at the end of the day, when you wake up the next morning and you look back at what you did, you realize that it didn't amount to anything. And yet, rather than put the weed away and just focus on cultivating that creativity and that deep thinking in a sober mindset, we end up developing this psychological dependency on the substance in order to feel creative, insightful, or like our life has a deeper meaning. And we end up reaching for weed whenever we come up against that creative impulse. We want to write something, and rather than struggle with the difficulty of wrestling with a blank page, we decide to smoke beforehand so that whatever we throw out there, it just feels like the greatest, most profound, deeply insightful writing ever. And the problem with that is that the pseudo-insight robs us of the tension and struggle that is necessary for actual, genuine creative work. And you can see this pattern extend beyond weed into other displacement activities, such as social media, conversations with AI chatbots, video games, Netflix, movies, and all sorts of different channels that essentially siphon this impulse for creative expression and deep philosophical exploration and epistemological insight into these avenues that don't lead anywhere. And they essentially give us an outlet. It's like a pressure release valve for this impulse that we become dependent on. And it leads to this positive feedback loop where we experience the desire to creatively express ourselves. We experience the curiosity that comes from asking why something is the way it is, or just wanting to explore the deeper meanings of something. And rather than face the difficult work of wrestling with that creativity, of wrestling with that philosophical impulse, we instead go down a channel like weed or these other activities that don't actually have any real risk or reward. They give us exactly what we want in a very short time frame, or at least an illusion of what we want, but they leave us with nothing real, nothing tangible. It is a fruitless endeavor, and yet we become psychologically addicted to it. And so this feedback loop perpetuates itself, and over time, it undermines our capacity to be creative or insightful in the first place. We become so dependent on smoking weed in order to experience this state of creativity or insight that in our day-to-day lives, when we are sober, we can barely handle facing a blank page and actually writing something, or a blank canvas and painting something. And the insidious part about this is that, especially if you're someone who is a creative individual, you probably also have a tendency towards perfectionism and some type of inner critic. And this plays perfectly into this feedback loop, because the inner critic's demand for perfection is a form of resistance that leads us back to these displacement activities. Because we can't do something perfectly right from the beginning, it's not 100% polished, it's not 100% original, it's not super, super deep and profound. Because we don't want to wrestle with the blandness and the mundane aspects of gradually reaching a creative accomplishment or a deep insight, we end up just accepting the illusion of insight and the illusion of creativity right off the bat, even though it doesn't actually lead to that in the long run. And what ends up happening is, like I said before, we become less creative and we become less insightful. And so something that I have done is that I have decided to stop smoking weed for myself personally. It has been about a month now that I have not been smoking, and it's something that I want to continue going forward, because I find that the real creative work is found in tolerating, the blank page, tolerating boredom, tolerating frustration, and then quieting my life enough so that I can actually allow the muse, my soul, to speak through me, rather than having some type of substance give me the sense of that creativity or that insight, and instead actually wrestling with the fact that it's up to me. I actually have to go through the process of teasing out that creative endeavor, whether it's a piece of art or a poem. And I have to actually wrestle with the blank page. Now, I have been fairly repetitive throughout this discussion here, but I'm just going to wrap this up with this. If you are someone who is creative, deep thinking, and you find yourself leaning on weed as a crutch, as an excuse not to actually engage fully in your creative endeavors and in your pursuit of meaning in life, it is a good opportunity to develop some self-awareness around your smoking habit. And I would encourage you to try to stop smoking for the next week. And while you do this, make sure that you have a level of grace so that you're not trying to punish yourself, but rather you're exploring the habit itself of smoking weed. You're exploring the need that you have that you're trying to cover up. And so as you embark on this 7-day experiment with abstinence from weed, pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to your emotions. Notice how you feel as the days go on. Notice the times and tendencies that lead you to want to smoke weed. What are the emotions and thoughts you're having beforehand, during your experience of being high, and then afterwards? Pay attention to that. Journal if that's something that is helpful for you. And ultimately, it's not about being some type of, perfect, pure saint. It is simply about cultivating a level of awareness around your behavior and understanding why you do what you do, and making sure that the habits that you're engaging in are actually leading to the results that you want in life. And so the other thing that I just wanted to wrap up with here is that I'm not universally prescribing or saying that weed is bad. Now, the quality and the intention behind weed plays a huge role, and that's a whole other video that I could get into. But for me personally, at this current phase of life, I am focusing on cultivating creativity and insightfulness with a sober mind. And that is my current goal right now. Now, you may have a different goal, and that's fine. But if you're like me and you have found that you are struggling with weed as a crutch, as a displacement activity for actual creative expression and for actual deep, insightful reflection and thought, then I would encourage you to take the next 7 days to stop smoking and pay attention to the thoughts and feelings that arise as you pursue that goal.